afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much, Dr. Roe, for joining us. As you know, we put together the Sophie Fireside Chats as a means to bring together practitioners in the field, leaders, thinkers, and doers who are out there doing health promotion and health education work as a part of the Sophie membership, and more broadly, health education specialists nationally and internationally. So my name is Heather Flattery. I'm the manager of membership and marketing at the Society for Public Health Education. And today I am joined by Dr. Roe, and we will be having a conversation as part of the Sophie Fireside Chat series. Here's a little bit of information just about Dr. Roe, and you can connect with her on her social media platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter. She's extremely active, as well as the HPP channel, which I know you'll talk about briefly, and then email at San Jose State as well. So I like to dive right in. I kind of want to just connect, and part of these conversations are certainly professional and learning more about where you've come from and what you've done academically and all of those other aspects. But I also like to get to know you a little bit personally. So I'd love to start off and just sort of learn, you know, who are you in a nutshell? Kind of what brought you to Sophie, and how did you find your way at San Jose State in California? Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Heather, for this invitation, and hello to everybody who's watching and listening when this goes live. I'm Kathleen Roe, and I came to California because my parents did. Both of my parents' families came from the Midwest during the Depression to a place that was warmer than Ohio and Missouri and would have more work opportunities. So my parents both came to California in the early 1930s, and then they both went to UC Berkeley, and I was born while my mom and dad were students at Berkeley. So who am I? Gee, I'm a mom, first and foremost. I'm a mother and a stepmother, and I've been a professor at San Jose State for 37 years, but 33 years. But I need to say I was, because I am now also 3 weeks into retirement from San Jose State. And I have to say, everybody looking forward to that time, there's just nothing like it. It's an amazing gift to be able to look back at a body of work and a lifetime of commitment to a place and a set of ideas, and to be part of the movement of public health and health education, and now think about, what can I do next when I don't have meetings and I don't have budgets and I don't have all the obligations that you have as you, develop a career in one place.
Absolutely.
I'm editor of Health Promotion Practice, which was the dream job for me, the thing that I wanted to do when I knew I was going to be retiring, but I still felt like I had one big thing left in me to do. So Health Promotion Practice is just a joy, and I am just honored and delighted to represent Sophie and our field through efforts to get the right literature out in the field, to get the right ideas out that stimulate discussion and dialogue, and to honor the diverse perspectives of the people working in our field and the outcomes that both they can envision and that very often we can realize.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things that are pinging in my brain, but the first one I wanted to just spin off of, since you were just talking about retirement. Congratulations. That is something to celebrate for sure. And so I assume you might have a little bit more time open for travel or visiting family. Do you like to travel? Are there places that you prefer to visit, or cultures you like to experience? What does that look like for you and your family?
That's a great question. We had our son when my husband already had 2 children, and they were older. They were teenagers, or going to be teenagers, when we started talking about it. And the deal that we made, because I wanted a child of my own, the deal that we made was that we would travel, because that was the one thing he had never done. He had never been out of the United States while he was raising his older kids. So I promised I would have a baby that could travel, because I had never had a baby. I didn't realize you can't say how your child is going to be. Luckily he traveled. And so we made a commitment as a family, since I had summers, that we would go for 3 weeks somewhere every summer. And we did that most of my life in our family. But when my son went to college in another state, I suddenly had a lot of open time, and a colleague invited me to go with her to Oaxaca. She got a grant that she had to fulfill and she needed my help doing it. And so I thought, okay, I've got time. This is different. I'll do that. And in Oaxaca, in a small pueblo of Arasola, I met a family where it's as if we had always been meant to know each other. And I didn't speak Spanish, and so I could only communicate basically with small children, and they didn't speak English, but there just was something that was magical about our relationship from the very start. They were forming an organization of artisans who make the ecoalebrijes, the beautiful painted wooden figures that are famous from Oaxaca. And I was building our academic department. And so we formed a partnership that has now been a 15-year relationship of exchange, the intercambio between San Jose State and the Pueblo of Arasola. Probably 30, 35 people from Mexico have come to San Jose State over the years to display their art, to sell, to do exhibitions on campus. And I took students every year for 13 years for spring break. And
that's
fantastic. So, yeah. And then of course we became padrinos, and now we go back all the time for graduations and babies and birthdays.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So that's
so,
what we want to do.
I feel like with traveling, you're right, there's so much there. And I think that that's so unique that you were able to combine that with this work passion at the same time. And it became this joint exercise. I just think that that's the best, when you can kind of fulfill so many parts of that through a mission, and incorporate travel and culture and all these other different things. So that's awesome. So let's piggyback to HPP and the Health Promotion Practice Journal. That has come such a long way. I think you guys just celebrated, was it your 24th?
20th anniversary.
20th anniversary.
20th year.
That is fantastic. And we are recording this now in June, which is also Pride Month. And I know that you guys do a myriad of articles and a beautiful collection that you represent online, which I also think is so representative and so well done, to really highlight the different elements of the LGBTQ population and how that relates to health education and health promotion and the needs there from a health equity standpoint. So I wanted to know a little bit more about how you became editor-in-chief. What is this process like? I know that you said you had been friends with Brick Lancaster in the past, and sort of, I guess I want to know a little bit more just about that journey that brought you to where you are.
Sure. Well, when I was Sophie when I was Sophie president, or before I was Sophie president, anyway, back in the day. So let me back up and say I've been a Sophie member. I've been a local chapter member for probably 40 years. I'm 67 now, and I'm sure I joined when I was about 25 or 26. So I've been a consistent chapter member, and I joined National Sophie in 1980, I believe, because I was part of a national movement aligned with Physicians for Social Responsibility to try to encourage health educators to take a stand against nuclear war and nuclear weapons and nuclear war prevention. Physicians for Social Responsibility was a really important and influential organization movement, really, within the medical field. And we really wanted public health and health educators to align. So I joined Sophie to get the organization to do a bigger political aim that I had in mind. But I was a health educator, and that made sense. But I didn't join Sophie for my own personal development. I joined Sophie because I saw it as an extraordinarily influential and powerful organization for a broader social change goal that I deeply believe in. But of course, once I was in Sophie, I loved it. And I saw all the professional development opportunities and all of the resources, including our original journal, Health Education and Behavior. So I kind of began working my way, chapter delegate and secretary, and, just those things that happen when you are part of an organization that you really love and believe in. So somewhere along the lines there, I was part of conversations that around this idea that our journal, Health Education and Behavior, is our flagship journal. It's a really important journal. It's a wonderful contribution to the literature and the advancement of science that Sophie creates, that Sophie is responsible for and creates. And it's a wonderful thing. But it didn't always speak to practitioners, and it didn't always use a language or talk about the things that practitioners really need now in the moment in order to advance their work. And with the at that time, with the emergence of the importance of evidence-based scholarship and evaluation, we felt that reading research articles or aspiring to do research was great for those on that path, but that so many SOFI members and so many people in the world who do the work are not that. They're us, they're practitioners. So we began the idea within SOFI of, could we have a journal for practitioners, by practitioners, for practitioners? And Elaine Auld was our relatively new CEO then, and she was completely on board with the idea. You mentioned Brett Lancaster, is our dear colleague who passed too early a few years ago. He was one of the key thinkers, John Allegrante, Bob Goodman. Some of these names might be people you've known or heard about. Yeah. And then Randy Schwartz, who became the founding editor. So SOFI and SAGE, the publisher of Health Education and Behavior, came together and figured out a way to make it happen. And so our journal began 20 years ago. And I was on that founding editorial board. Brick and I had a column. The journal was organized very differently than it was by departments.
Okay.
And we had a department called the Circle of Research and Practice. And our goal, we had so much fun together. Our goal was to bring practitioner voices to the journal. So the things that practitioners wanted to write about and wanted to learn and read about. So Brick had a job with CDC where he went out to all kinds of funded communities to find out what they were doing in prevention programs, broadly speaking, and especially on Indian reservations. So when he would be out and about, we always said he was trolling. That was when trolling was a good word. He was trolling for potential authors. And he was very charming. So he would make relationships with people. He would talk to them. He would see what they're doing. And then he would hook them and say, well, would you want to write that up? And many practitioners at that point would close the door. No, I can't write. I'm not a writer. I'm not a researcher. And he would say, well, let me connect you with my colleague. And then my job was to shepherd their ideas to publication. And we did that. I think we did that for like 10 years. I think they finally had to kick us off the board because we loved it so much. I'm so proud of some of the articles and so many of the practitioners who I know were scared and nervous and trusted us with, with the process of turning their idea and their community experience into an article. So I loved HPP, Health Promotion Practice. And then I contributed to it as an author a few times in the intervening years. And then when the opportunity to become editor came up, I thought a lot about it, and it wasn't anything I wanted to do cavalierly. I did not want to do it in a state of overload or, yet another project. I didn't want to overreach, but I thought I could probably do it. And so I hadn't applied for a job in a really long time. I'd applied for grants, but I don't think I'd applied for a job in like 40 years. I was really nervous, like prepared.
Oh, wow.
And I applied. So you had to do a written vision statement and 3 different written documents you had to submit, as well as a detailed CV.
Got it.
And then they narrowed it down, and then they did some interviews, panel interviews with a group of people from the board and the journals. And I got it. I was in Italy. This is a funny story. I was in Italy on vacation in Rio Maggiore, which is in Cinque Terre. You're in a tiny, tiny little town that we really like to have enjoyed visiting in the past. And when I got the email that I got it, I was so unbelievably excited. I just remember, just twirling and dancing around our little tiny 1-room apartment, that I was gonna have the rest of this vacation to just, live my life. And then I was gonna come home and I was gonna take on this awesome responsibility. It was a great moment.
I bet. And it is a responsibility. I mean, what this has grown into is such work. You do 6 issues a year, if not additional supplements. These are over 100 to 150 pages each journal. And obviously the peer review process is nothing short. It's time intensive. It's reflective of the research and what the practitioners do. And so I guess I wanted to know if you could elaborate on that a little bit. I have a slide that talks a little bit about publishing. Some people who may be watching this now or later are curious to the publishing process and might be interested in doing that themselves. And as you mentioned, when you kind of got connected with those folks from the CDC, maybe some of them were hesitant or reticent, and you helped guide them to the finished product and the finish line. And maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit and tell people how they can make this process a reality for themselves.
Sure. Let's go step by step. And I can, share honestly, I have always been, until recently, the last 10 years of my life, maybe not so much, but prior to that, I was a very reluctant writer. I am a very slow writer, and it takes me a long time to come around to what I want to say. You learn a formula, of course, professionally. You learn how to write memos, you learn how to write quarterly reports, you learn that. But to me, publishing in the literature that will stay forever in discoverable to other people is a really, really serious commitment. And I never took it lightly. I don't think I was very good at it to begin with. It just took me a long time to learn how to do it. So when I talk about this, I don't want to ever sound like I'm being glib or like I think it's so easy. It's not easy. It's complicated, and it's especially complicated if you're pushing the envelope, if you're pushing the boundary of what we know and what we talk about in our field. It's hard. But if you're doing that and you can embrace that along with the science and the structure of what you have to do, I guarantee you, authors, will find an energy, kind of a mojo that just grabs hold, not the first day that you sit down to write, but grabs hold eventually as you're working on it, and then you just can't stop. Then it just flows. So with that in mind, let's talk through these steps. First of all, deciding where and what to publish. This is really important. A lot of people have a grant and they do a thing and the thing is over and they wrote a grant report, so they figure, this is my assumption, they figure, oh, I should put that in HPP, or I should write that up for publication. It's an article halfway done. And that's absolutely true. And in the early days of HPP, maybe even the first 10 years, we were so able to take all kinds of process evaluations, small scale studies, nice, tightly little done program interventions, because there wasn't a lot of that out there yet. But now everything has to be evaluated, right? Now everybody's writing good qualitative reports, multi-perspective or multi-method reports of their interventions. People are doing evidence-based interventions. So just writing up your intervention, it doesn't make it into the literature anymore, or at least it doesn't make it into ours. So what you need to really think about, what I think about when I'm writing, is what is so unique and important about what we're finding, or what we did, or the way that we did it, or who we did it with. What's important about the way we established trust, or what's important about the way we followed through with the community when the project was over? What's that rare, important insight from a mom, or from a teenager, or from a supervisor, or someone who just experienced the thing that you're studying? What's the really important thing you want to put into the literature? What's the thing that deserves to be there forever because it will advance the field? And that's the hardest part, because then it's not just a formulaic book report. Now it's a much more personal, professional scientific product. So decide what you want to publish, and then who's going to take that, who's interested in that kind of work, and the formats that they have available. That brings you over to box number 2, which is to review the author guidelines really carefully and really know the journals that you're considering putting your work or submitting your work to. They may not be journals that you've been following. You might do a search on kind of the topic or the methods that you've been using and come across 6 journals you'd never even heard about. So before investing too much in writing for them, I advise, and I do myself, really read what they are publishing and read their author guidelines very carefully. The author guidelines are always found in the back of a print journal, or much more easily on the website of the journal. All journals have websites and with a lot of information on them. So read the guidelines very carefully, and be critical for yourself. Are they going to take what I want to write? And if they aren't, then move on to another journal or another venue. Also, look at what is printed, what is available online from the journals. Because it takes about 18 months for something from the time it's accepted. It takes about 18 months for it to show up in the print journal. So 18 months ago at HPP, we were accepting a certain kind of content. but things have changed and our priorities have changed and the world is changing and we want to get some other kind of work out and advance some other ideas. So what we're accepting now, you will get a much better sense of if you look at what is coming live online right now. So when you go to any journal's website, their online articles will be available. Those are the articles that were accepted about 6 weeks ago and have gone through production and are going to be available online. You can use them, you can cite them, authors can claim them, but they're going to wait there for 18 months before they get in print. So if you want to see what a journal is accepting right now, look at what they've accepted, what's live online for the last maybe 6 months. And then develop your outline and your abstract. That's just, you know, that's just the hard work. You got to sit down at that keyboard and develop an outline for yourself and an abstract. And I sound like an old school teacher, right? Develop your outline. But the reason for the outline is you want to match your outline to the author guidelines and make sure that you're going to end or begin with what they want. Health promotion practice is a good example because we say in our author guidelines that the end of the article, somewhere near the end, after the findings are presented, we want a section very clear and clearly labeled on implications for practice, and can be implications for practice and policy, or it can be implications for practice and research, implications for practice, research, and policy, any combination, but it has to be practice. And it has to be there, and it has to be clearly identified. You wouldn't believe how many manuscripts we get that go from results to discussion, limitations, and conclusions. And implications for practice aren't there. And that's probably because the authors read the author guidelines when they were starting, and then they got on a roll and they wrote their paper, and they're so used to ending a paper that way that they totally forgot that we want this section. And so that's why I think the outline is important, and your abstract. And then just develop it and write it and rewrite it. I am a notorious rewriter. I rewrite just forever. But rewrite, and get some other eyes on it, eyes that have skills that maybe you don't have. So if you're not the best at in-text citations or organizing your bibliography, get a friend or a colleague to help with that. If you know that you always mess up its versus it is, you know, IT apostrophe S or ITS or whatever your little thing is that has haunted you your whole life, get somebody else to read your paper to make sure you didn't do that again, or do it yourself, looking for that mistake that you always made. I write incredibly long sentences, just so long. So it's helpful for me to, once it's done, look at what I've written and go back and see, do I have any sentence that goes more than 3 lines? Because if so, it's probably too long. So you can do it yourself or have colleagues. And then submit it and carefully follow all the submission guidelines. There's a lot of stuff that you have to do. It's all submitted electronically. You know, back in the day, the papers, the manuscripts, you used to have to submit 5 print copies of your manuscript. And that manuscript those copies were sent to a central office, and then they were mailed, FedEx, to the reviewers, to the editor, and then to the reviewers. Now it's also simple. We have wonderful electronic management, but it does take a minute to figure it out, especially the first time, to how to submit. Yeah. And then it goes into the black box for you as an author of peer review. What actually happens is it comes to me, or Janine Robitaille, our editorial manager at Sophie. She processes it first. She sees it in her queue, her electronic queue. She processes it, checks it, makes sure everything's there, contacts authors if there's a problem. And then she forwards it to me. And I look at it and I go from the cover letter, you know, I read the cover letter, I read the abstract, then I read the paper. And if I feel like this is, yes, this has potential, this is in the areas that we're wanting to move in, we haven't published on this in a while, or this complements what we've recently published. If I feel that it's good, or even if it has good potential, then I send it out to review. And I pick reviewers. Every paper gets a minimum, has to have 2 completed reviews, but peer reviewers are a hard bunch to nail down or to get to. And we probably send a paper out. It's not surprising if we have to send a paper out to 20 people before we find 2 who are able to do it within the 3 weeks. And they're the 2 that I want. I never just send out blind, wildly. I very carefully match population, methods, expertise, and content. And so that's a little bit of a careful set that I try to find. So anyway, it goes out to review. And when it comes back, they have 3 weeks, and some get it back in 3 weeks and some don't. So we That's what takes so long when you submit
Yeah.
a paper and you feel like you've been waiting for months. It's because we're not getting the reviews the way we need them.
Yeah.
We have in our journal, we have of course a backup system. After a certain amount of time, someone from the editorial board will pick up a review, and sometimes in desperation, I'll do the review because we don't want things sitting too long.
Yeah.
So anyway, then you get a letter, you get an electronic letter with the news. Now, I would say right off, Meredith Minkler is the only person I have ever known in my life who often has to have no revise and resubmit instructions. And I remember the first time it happened for her when we were much younger, and she was so excited. Prolific, great writers that we know and love and read often have to revise their manuscripts because they wrote what they wanted to say, and now it's got to be massaged to what readers will understand and be able to work with, and to fit what the journal is wanting. We never mess with the content, but here's a place where we will be instructive. Okay. We say in our guidelines, we don't use target population. There's, HPP was founded with that we did not use target population because nothing good happens to a target. Targets get hit. Targets are static and flat. Targets can't fight back. Targets don't get up and move afterwards. It's a violent and a one-directional energy. And we don't like that word. So even though it's, standard language, HPP 20 years ago said we're not going to use target population. And probably 30% of the manuscripts we get talk about target populations because that's the language of the field, but we're stubborn. The language has to change. And so sometimes a revise and resubmit will be on something relatively minor but crucial to us, which is language. We also are working hard this year on removing all stigmatizing language from what we publish. So we don't talk about substance abusers. We don't even like to talk about substance abuse. It's substance use. Yeah. And so there's our journal guidelines, and then also a piece that Holly Mata and I wrote on the power of words is an effort to explain why it's so important to speak with respect and dignity about all the people and all the experiences that we're sharing in our work. So sometimes it's a resubmit because of something like that. Sometimes it's a resubmit because, boy, you've got a great idea, but this is all mixed up. Or sometimes it's a revise and resubmit because reviewers know of key references the authors missed, and the work won't be taken seriously if these references aren't included. And then often it's a revise and resubmit because you didn't do implications for practice, or right. Or some other piece is missing, or the tables don't make any sense to us. So most authors have to revise and resubmit. With HPP, most authors have to revise and resubmit twice. Okay. So know that when you send it off, it's not like, okay, that's done, I'm going to be published soon. No, we're going to now enter into another phase, which is the communication between the reviewers and the editor and the authors. And I have to say, I know from being on the other end of it, it can be so annoying when you wrote your best possible work and you sent it off and you thought it was great, and reviewers come back and it can be inconsistent. One reviewer can say, this is really great, we need it into the literature, I have a few comments, but otherwise great. And then somebody else will give you 3 single spaced pages of corrections and things they want to see. Yeah. As an author, I usually get really happy, and I love that person who liked my work, and I get really annoyed and offended by the one who, but you know what? When you take a ruler and go down line by line by line and read what that expert is telling you, you don't have to accept it. You can always argue back and say, well, reviewer number 2 said this and they didn't understand. This is a qualitative sample, so of course I don't have quantitative results. You can argue back. Yes. But you can also listen. And what I have found from all of the papers that I've worked with, when authors listen to a really extensive, thoughtful review, that paper has so much more impact. It's going to be such a better paper and do what the author wanted, which is communicate their ideas more effectively. So that goes on until it's done. And then when it's finally accepted, it is, when I have the final say. When it's finally accepted, you get a congratulations letter and a little social media survey to fill out, because we commit to promoting every paper that we accept and through social media. So we need the author's images and, preferred headlines, any message ideas, Twitter handles, all of that. Yeah. And then a few weeks later, you get a note from Sage saying it's ready. Take a look at it. Is it exactly how you wanted it? You sign off and it goes live out into the world.
That is unbelievably exciting. And I can only imagine I know we award different papers of the year through Sophie at our annual meeting and our conference. And so I think that this is just such a great way of recognition. And I'm glad that you spelled it out in these different steps for folks who are really just very curious and trying to figure out where they fall into the mix of this in academia and whether or not they want to publish research or what that looks like for them. So I think that this is really, really helpful.
It's also, but Heather, it's also a little optimistic because I need to be clear about this. A lot of people write now, because everybody has to do evaluations and has to write reports, right? So lots of people write. And not everybody who should be writing is writing. So there still are more authors to discover and to bring into the fold and to demystify this process. But we accept 25% of what is submitted. So we reject a lot. I reject a lot just without sending it to review because I don't want to waste the author's time waiting for it to go through a review when I know it's not going to make it in health promotion practice. So let me talk a little bit about what happens when it doesn't have this happy outcome right away. When you get a so sorry letter, don't be afraid of that because there's important information in sorry, we can't accept this. And different editors, I'm sure, do this differently, but in an HPP letter, there's a lot of information about what the problem was. There's always the opportunity to contact me and talk about it, talk it through. You can't really appeal. I mean, you can, but it's not that kind of a thing. It's more about, we can have a dialogue about what else needs to happen for this paper to be ready. But the really great thing that we have with Sage is that if we reject a paper that's well written and has potential, but it's just not right for us right now, we can invite the authors to release it, which is just a simple click in the electronic letter, to the Sage transfer desk, where a group of dedicated editors at Sage, staff people at Sage, will search for a fit between this paper and one of the thousands of Sage titles. Yeah. So this has been extremely helpful for authors because they get the feedback from the reviewers. They get the opportunity to have Sage be like a scout for you to find a place that will take it, where it's a better fit, where they're accepting that sort of thing right now, or they're looking for topics or authors like that. And that's a really helpful thing. So, and it's a wonderful thing. It's just about a year or two old. So I really encourage people, when you get a when you get a rejection letter, it's sad that that's even the word. It's when it's a no, sorry, we can't do it letter. Don't let that into your heart. It's just like fitting a puzzle. That you have a piece that doesn't fit in the puzzle that's half done for health promotion practice, but it's exactly the piece perhaps that another puzzle is looking for. So stay strong. And the reason I say this, so now I'm retired, I'm going to share all my stories every time I can because I don't have students anymore to tell. All my students know this story. When I graduated from Berkeley, I was Miss Thing. I got these awards and I got recognized, and my dissertation was kind of risky, and it was a good study, but it was risky. And so I got a lot of credit for doing that. I was 30 years old and I was, probably 30, 31. I was flying. And I was encouraged by my advisors, Dr. Meredith Minkler and others, to submit to, this is such a good dissertation, write your papers and submit as high as you possibly can. Where would you love to be published? Well, I would love to be published in the International Journal, Social Science and Medicine. So I take my dissertation and I write up my first little paper and I send it off to Social Science and Medicine. And I was slammed. I was just, the letter I got, I get my letter in those days, the paper letter. I'm so excited. I'm going to be published in Social Science and Medicine. No. And I got two separate reviewers, single-spaced, many pages of critique of what? Of me? And I was crushed. I put that letter in a drawer in my desk and I didn't open it for a year. I didn't read what they said other than my first read through my tears. I put it away. I didn't read it. And everything else that happens in your life when you are not dealing with your business happened to me that year, right? And I couldn't get it out of my head because I hadn't resolved it. But I was afraid. I was so hurt and so demoralized, and probably like so many, I probably had some imposter syndrome. And then, then I was mad at my advisors. Why didn't you tell me I wasn't any good? You told me I was great, and social science and medicine says this is terrible. I went to counseling to get over this. That's how pitiful it was. I let that rejection just eat away at me. I had to pay to go to counseling to open a drawer. And my first week assignment from the counselor was just open it and read the first like 4 lines and come in and tell me what it says. So of course, the minute in a safe space, stronger than I could have been on my own, in a safe space, calmer, when I read it, all it had was critique of the way I was writing the paper. It wasn't a critique of me. He didn't even know me. It wasn't a critique of my ideas. It wasn't a critique of the study. It was a critique of the way I was writing. And I remember so clearly the counselor saying, well, why did you think you would be an expert at this kind of writing? Have you ever written a short, you've written a like 600-page dissertation. Have you ever written an article, a 15-page article? No. Why would you expect that it would just be such an easy jump?
Yeah.
And part of it was because I didn't take seriously there's a system, that there's a process, because it was mysterious, right? It wasn't laid out like this. It was mysterious. And I thought, well, everybody does it around me at Berkeley, so I can do it. I couldn't do it. I had to learn. I had to be humble. I had to get over myself, and I had to rewrite it. And I rewrote it, and of course, they accepted it. So I did get my first publication ever, was in social science and medicine about my dissertation. But what a ridiculous journey it was, because of my pride and my lack of serious thought about what it would take to learn to write this way. And also, what a game changer for me, about humility and kindness and courage, and try to take care of your business before you have to pay to go to therapy to do it.
Absolutely. Well, I think therapy is good for everybody at some point or another anyway, but
you're right. Therapy is good therapy.
I think you brought up so many good points, and I appreciate you sharing the anecdotes as well, because I think it adds so much to that. I want to pivot slightly. We're actually running kind of short on time, but I do generally we like to keep these to about a half hour, 45 minutes, something like that. So I want to touch on a couple of other things, though, that you and I did have a previous discussion on, and you really touched on it a little bit earlier when you mentioned the article on words and that project that you and Holly Mata worked on together. I feel like you've actually presented that at Sophie before, because it sounds very, very familiar to me. But I think that has such value and such good weight to it. And when you and I have discussed a little bit previously here, folks are looking to publish, that may also then, turn into a presentation or an opportunity to speak publicly. And so I would like to kind of touch on that. Often we provide a few different takeaways for folks who are tuning in for these fireside chats. What is it that might be a good thing to take away from this conversation that they may be able to not only build in their practical knowledge, especially everything you just mentioned about publishing, but then also about public speaking. You are, if you don't mind me saying, phenomenal. And I think that you do so well at knowing what your passions are and really expressing them well. And so I would love for you to share kind of just your expertise and what your sort of go-to mantras are when it comes to preparing for public speaking, and how one can do it well.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for making this infographic. I'm learning that my new thing this week seems to be infographics, and I'm a fan. So thank you for making this from our conversation. Let me start by saying that my father's a minister, and he was very young when he had me, and so I was so fortunate to be able to grow up in the presence of someone young, vibrant, figuring out for himself what he wanted to say every Sunday morning. And he would think about it all week. And then on Saturday night after dinner, we would all be banished to, a bedroom, because there were no family rooms in those days. We would all be banished to another place. And Dad would take over the dining room table and work this thing all night long. He'd work it all through the night. And I would watch him write. He'd read, he'd write, he'd practice it, he'd say it to himself. And then in church, the next morning, in my mind, this perfect essay would come out. So I grew up with not only the expectation that you don't speak unless you have something to say, and also that your opportunity to speak is a gift and a privilege, and not to be taken lightly, and that there's hard work involved in doing it. It doesn't, I mean, for some people, I'm sure public speaking just comes, but for my dad and what I saw and what I so emulated was that careful thought process. So these are the three things that when I have an opportunity to speak, I really think about. And whether it's a webinar like this, or a class presentation, or a Sophie presentation, or standing up at a demonstration in our neighborhood, we all have opportunities for public speaking, to bigger and smaller publics. So these are the things that I think about. First of all is the importance of not just adding to the noise. There is so much noise. I think about this on Twitter too. There's a million things I could like and retweet and post about, but there's so much noise. And so first of all, I don't want to just add to the noise. But secondly, as a white woman, and a white woman who's a professional and has had a lot of professional opportunities, I can kind of easily work my way into the space, often into some spaces often, but is that my right? Or, and is what I have to add unique enough? Is there a time in which my voice and what I could say adds to the conversation, or does it take oxygen away from other voices that could be there if I would just be quiet? Yeah. So public speaking is about public speaking, and also about public listening and public dialogue. So I always think first about that is, am I the one? Am I the one? Is this the time? Is this the place? Do I have something unique to offer? And sometimes I understand, sometimes my perspective and who I am, my age, my race, my experiences, where I live, how I live, they may be extraordinarily useful to the moment. I don't mean to sell that short, but not always. I don't always take for granted that I'm the one. And then secondly, if I have a space, if I have a platform, how can I use it to include other people? So if I'm given the opportunity for like a 30-minute keynote speech, blah, 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 me up there talking, I could do it. I have a million stories and things. I like it. I could do it, but so much better if I can weave in the words of other people, if I can show on the giant screen quotes from other people, or if I can share 3 different projects besides the one that I'm there to talk about. That's so much more powerful and impactful for everybody. Yeah. So using an opportunity, an invitation that I have had, or an opportunity that comes to me to be inclusive, and then thinking within that, who are the faces, the people, the voices, the perspectives that maybe won't get this opportunity yet, that I could bring forward with me, is something that I always take very seriously. And then this is really important, especially anybody in academia, or once you start moving up in your profession, you have a lot of opportunities to give conference presentations, or submit abstracts to be considered for a Sophie conference. I always try to ask myself, is if I have 20 minutes, if I have 15 minutes in a concurrent session, is what can I say that will advance conversation, advance equity, advance the moment, and not just advance me and serve the status quo? And if I'm reporting on a study that's just the same old stuff, and we did it well, and I got the spot, and I can do it, what is that? What did that bring? Did that move anybody? Did that change a perspective? So what can I do to have people walk away, like I probably did as a little girl listening to my dad? Wow, I see things in a new way. So my two favorite like mantras for teaching and speaking and all that are from David Fetterman's Empowerment, Evaluation, Illumination, and Liberation. So I'm hoping that when I do public speaking, also when I write, that I through the process, I see things in a new way, and people reading it see things in a new way. That's illumination. And liberation is that I can act in a new way, free of previous constraints because of what I now know. And that's what I would hope when I do public speaking, that or writing, that at the end of this interaction, me and the reader, me and the audience, me and the, whoever, that we both can see things in new ways, and that we can both act without previous constraints.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. I think, and you know what, I don't think that could be more timely. With everything going on in the world, I think we have truly come to a place where it is important to be mindful of platforms, be mindful of who's saying what and how they're saying it, and just understand that I think, are we serving or not? And trying to, I mean, one can only define that for themselves, I think, truly at the end of the day, but having that sense of awareness is very important. I think, especially in your case, you work with such a prestigious journal, and you do so many things to promote and affect the outward expression of health education and promotion, and the work that is being done on, I mean, a global scale, really, that it's credible that you look at it with that sense of weight. I think that that's really, really important. And you mentioned something before, and I think, so I kind of wanted to ask you again about any particular mantras. I know you just mentioned a book, but are there people, are there words that you sort of live by, or something that you hold near and dear as either personally or professionally, that really remind you of the way that you want to be a presence in the world? And what does that look like for you? Is there a particular author or mentor or someone that you look toward?
Ooh, that's a whole other podcast, Heather.
I know.
Yes. Yes. So, as usual, I'm going to make it a long answer. Yes, there are several. So mentors, Meredith Minkler, my best friend and mentor. Meredith Minkler, when I was a doctoral student, she was a faculty member. In our doctoral seminar, we went around and said, what drives us? What keeps us in the game? And I'll never forget, people said, I'm so interested in this topic, or I'm passionate about this. We all had those nice little answers. And Mary said, rage. My rage keeps me in the game. Whoa, what? She said, my rage at injustice, and my rage that nothing changes. And that is what drives everything. And at that moment, as a newly on my way academic, and as a still evolving, developing professional, I made the conscious choice to move rage into my center as well. I think that maybe growing up in a congregational religious home, with my dad being a very thoughtful social justice minister, I think I was raised with a perspective of that the most important thing is love and authenticity and acting in the world in a particular way. And I think that the rage was something you feel, but then you're called to move forward. And Mary pulling rage back in, and then having what I realized over time is you have to find a way to live with the exhaustion of rage burning at your center, or rage and love being in constant proximity to each other. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. But without it, without it, I don't have the religious calling that my father has. So without those dual fires in me, I don't think that I would be in the fight the way that I have been able to be. So so mentors and ideas. First, I start with rage. Secondly, there are so many. There's a wonderful author, Sarah Smith, who wrote I think one novel about a young pianist in Paris at the turn of the last century, who was the first woman to give a concert on her own as a pianist in this conservatory. And I was a performer when I was growing up, and I was a musician. And so the beginning of this book, or the part of this book just really stuck with me, and it also is really important to me. So the line is something like this: in the moment before playing, there's always that silence. You have only yourself and what you're going to bring to this moment. Just give you chills. I remember I was a violinist, and I remember, you know, those moments of just before playing, there's just that silence. And so I've taken to every time I do a public presentation for, you know, a million years now, when I get to that podium, I especially love this at graduation. I get to that podium, I stop, and I consciously stop, and I breathe, and I hear that line. In the moment before playing, there's always this silence. You have only and what you will bring to it. And then the last one, I guess the last one I'll share is make a choice that matters. When I became a department chair so long ago, we were going through a crisis. We were a health education program, and we had 13 majors. We were in total disarray. Our undergrad program had 13 majors. Our MPH program was going great, but we had 13 majors. And the dean gave me the challenge that you need like 150 majors in 3 years, or you're going to nursing. You're gone. Your health education will not exist. So and by the way, we're cutting all your faculty, so you only got your full-time people. So it was 3 of us, Dan Paralis, Ed Mamery, and I, and some other colleagues, and we just dug in. We dug in so hard, and we came up with our department slogan, and our way of working was make a choice that matters. So of course, make a choice that matters was our marketing slogan to get all those other majors out there that should be in public health. Make a choice that matters. Don't study English, study public health. Make a choice that matters. Yes. But also it became a mantra for us, and then it just oozed into the rest of my life that, you know, we make a million choices a day, right? What to eat, whether to use a paper bag or a plastic bag or a cloth bag, whether to wear a mask, whether to make time to do this, whether to accept this paper, whether to call that author. You know, we make a million, whether to run this morning or not. We make a million choices. So make a choice that matters.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And I love that quote, but I actually loved another one that you shared with me as well. And I'd like to end on that, because I think that that's such a perfect component. And I think you've wrapped so much of what you've done. I appreciate you taking the time to really share with us, not just who you are as a editor-in-chief of the Health Promotion Practice Journal, but you know, as an educator, as an author, as a you know, a person leading the charge, and really just as a woman in this world, just kind of discovering it for herself. I think that all of that has been so rewarding to learn about you, and I thank you for sharing that with our audience and the rest of the Sophie membership, obviously. But thank you for everything that you do, and for being part. Do you want to speak any notes, any last words on either this quote or anything that we haven't had a chance to share on before we maybe open it up to a question or two, if we have any folks still with us?
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Heather, for inviting me, and thank you to Sophie. The work that Sophie does is so important. Our niche is small but mighty, you know, and Sophie has been so in the game for so long, always learning, always evolving. I'm so proud to be decades long Sophie member, and grateful for all the opportunities that being part of Sophie has afforded me and my department, and you know, my students, and our journals and authors. I think the way I'd like to close is to read this. Can I do that? Because
yes,
I love this, and I got this is from Hafez, who is a 14th century Persian poet, and I got it from a student many years ago, Neelam Padikanda, who now, her name is now Neelam Kondawolf, and she's a health educator and a physician now in the South. And this is what she gave me this quote: even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, "You owe me." Look what happens with a love like that. It lights up the whole world. So my husband and I have this in our hallway going into our kitchen and family room, and I see it every day, and it moves me. It moves me every time.
Yeah.
So I'm open for questions if there's anything you'd like to ask.
Yeah, let me switch back to our earlier slide too, just to do that. And I know we have a couple of participants still with us, but does anyone have any questions or any thoughts to share? I'll leave it. I'm going to check in with the chat really quickly. you're welcome to utilize the chat if you have any questions, and I can share them here. But I think even if folks are tuning into this later or watching this at a later time, I think that this is so full of knowledge and takeaways that will be very beneficial for years to come. So I'm so grateful that you made the time. Yeah, someone else just even said great insights, good takeaways, and I pulled this slide back up while we're waiting, just for folks to be able to tune in and connect. Obviously, you can reach out to me, the manager of membership and marketing here at SOFI. Membership@sofi.org is our predominant email, and then certainly reach out to Dr. Roe via Twitter, follow Health Promotion Practice online.
Yes.
They do is it every week, the HPP free on Mondays?
On Mondays, but we're doing everything we can to make our articles as open and accessible to people as possible, but definitely every Monday, HPP free.
Especially on that. So yeah, so tune in, check us out, keep us on the radar, and we appreciate you all for joining us and participating. And we will go ahead and sign off for today. So thank you so much for joining the Fireside Chat.
Thank you.